I did some research on just on how they were trying to base the dragons off of, and Toothless is based off of a panther mixed with a fighter jet.
I went through it because I was like, I know that Toothless has a lot of characteristics of like a cat, and they give it to all the dragons. They slitted eyes, fascination with grass like it's catnip, likes to eat fish, stalks like a cat, regurgitates food, afraid of snake-like things. The eel, scratching under their chin is their favorite thing. They like to follow lights like lasers on the floor, but they also have several characteristics of like a bat, which is like Toothless hangs upside down sometimes, and then they use sound to throw off the aim of dragons in general.
There's a lot of characteristics that we haven't seen in media that they use with these dragons that just make them stand out and make them really memorable and add a ton of character. It's really fun when they have that dual personality where it's like they're a cinnamon roll until they're not.
Dragon claw, wing and scale. Come now, let's examine a tale of the greatest beast ever considered. Another episode of Big Flying Lizards.
In this movie, we cover and see several different dragons. We see, obviously, the Night Fury of Toothless. We see the Red Death, the monstrosity at the end. But there's also some other smaller, maybe not as crucial to the story dragons, but still have very interesting aspects. Before we get diving in, as much as I'd love to spend the next 6 hours discussing and grading every single dragon that pops up onto the screen, I just wanted to ask both you, TD and Josh, what was your favorite dragon, with the exception of Toothless and the Red Death, that we saw in this first movie? Was it the Deadly Natter, the blue dragon? Was it more of the chunky boy, Grunkle? Or what do we think? I'm going to turn it over to you, TD. What was your favorite dragon other than the main two dragons?
I'm a fan of the one that can burst into flames. I'm blanking on his name as well. Something Nightmare, right?
Is the Monstrous Nightmare.
Monstrous Nightmare. Yeah, sleek, simple design, kind of like a classic when you think dragon. He's got some of those elements, the elongated neck, the elongated snout, great coloring, and I love that he can burst into flames. I think that's great.
I, as a very fervent fan of the Red Dragons, are of the same opinion. Josh, I'm going to turn over to you. What was your favorite there?
So I took notes on this because I want to talk about it. It was the hideous Zippleback. It's the one that has like shoots the gas and then ignites it with the other head.
Yes.
I thought that the design of that was really cool and unique.
It was, and I also just love the idea of like where one head is just bursting out that gaseous that makes it explode, but then the other one, it's not even really breathing fire. It's just like clicking its tongue to like have it ignite, sort of. We covered it when we were discussing Delicious Sin Dungeon. That's how the dragons were breathing fire. I think I showed my hand a little bit too soon, though. I think the Grunkle was my favorite. It was just the big chunky boy who is...
You love a chunky boy.
I love me a chunky boy. And hey, I felt...
for a chunky boy.
And he was just like me, easily distracted at just little noises that were going around. And it just gave me also just Bumblebee energy, like just sort of like flying around. You have no idea how it's able to actually fly. It's significantly larger than its wings there. But yeah, that's there. And on that note, welcome to Big Flying Lizards, a dragon movie and television podcast. I am your host, Bryce Wilson. I am not joined by one amazing guest. I am joined by two amazing guests, both of which people that have been on the podcast before. The first, TD Orel, author of Titan's Nest, fantasy enthusiast, as well as dragon enthusiast, and the number one bitten knight here among us, as well as Josh Harrop, our English teacher extraordinaire and dragon fanatic, as well as super fan from day one, and of course his last but not least title, the commander of comments in the comments section. How we doing, guys?
Fantastic. Love it. I honestly didn't think that I was going to get another invite. I thought I wore my invite out last time, so I'm glad I didn't scare away everyone.
Well, we'll see how this episode goes, and maybe that will change up. But how about yourself, TD?
I'm fantastic. I myself am not surprised at all that I've been invited back because I did incredibly well last time. So no surprises there.
Well, I mean, considering that we had to cover Rhea, the last dragon,
Yeah.
But if it's all right with you, I would love to introduce everybody to not a mid film like Raya the Last Dragon or an obscure film like Willow, but very mainstream and very front of center, and arguably one of the most famous dragon movies of all time. How to Train Your Dragon is a 2010 American animated fantasy film loosely based on the 2003 novel by John Powell, produced by DreamWorks Animation and distributed by Paramount Pictures. It was directed by Chris Sanders and Dean Biblois. The film stars Jay Pacher and Gerard Butler, Greg Ferguson, Annika Farron, Jonah Hill, Christopher Mintz-Plasse, T.J. Miller, and Kristen Wiig. The story takes place in Berk, a mythical Viking village. Hiccup, an undersized teen wishing to become a dragon slayer like the other Vikings, injures a rare night fury dragon, but is unable to bring himself to kill it. He instead helps and befriends the dragon and quickly discovers that things are not exactly as they seem in a conflict between the Vikings and the dragons. How to Train Your Dragon premiered in the Gibson Amphitheater on March 21st, 2010, and was released in the United States on March 26th by Paramount Picture and DreamWorks Animation. The film was critically and commercially success, grossing over $494 million worldwide, becoming the 10th highest grossing film in 2010. It was widely acclaimed for its animation, voice acting, writing, musical score, humor, plot, and 3D sequences. The film was nominated for 2 awards in the 83rd Academy Awards and received numerous other accolades. So right off the top, I'll just start with you, TD. What was your overall thoughts of this acclaimed film?
It's a great movie. It's overall just a solid movie. We'll obviously get into it, but the world building, Berk itself is interesting as a location, and it's fun. There's character arcs. The writing is great. I won't get into my negative thoughts, but overall, I think it's a great movie.
Awesome. Josh?
This is a great movie. When you gave me the list of movies for us to talk about, I had to make this my number one. You know, right up there with Willow. Willow's, that's ours. But I love this movie. It's fantastic. And just like TD said, like the setting of Berk is by far one of my favorites. And they did so well with the world building. I kind of hope that we get to talk about that a little bit. But yeah, it's awesome.
We definitely will. One thing that I noticed when I watched the film is I feel like a lot of films really struggle with pacing. And again, I understand, like, trying to write out a story and make it so it is just going in a way that is very entertaining, it's enthralling, and just all in all trying to be captivating to an audience. This starts off strong, and we'll dive into like the entrance and more part, but it starts off strong and then it just is riding that high. And I don't think there really is a lull. I mean, there's points where it's a little confusing to keep track of like the actual what's going on in the story, and we'll again dive into that more, but there's no slow point. Like I talked about Shrek a few months back, and there's some points in Shrek where you're getting that lull. And I mean, this is DreamWorks, but I think arguably this is one of the best pacing movies that DreamWorks has done.
Yeah, for sure. It moves from start to finish. It feels like really consistently. It does this, just slowly keeps moving forward, and on that slight incline where you can feel things building the whole time. Yeah, it's paced super well.
And all the characters are entertaining. I don't think there's anyone that I'm blanking on the guy's name, and Josh, you might be able to tell me, but the one Viking that has like the missing arm and the missing leg,
Yeah. His name, sorry, I made a list real quick. Gobber the Belch.
Gobber's great.
All of his little snide comments that he was making throughout the film, I just was dying.
The story of how he lost his arm and his leg.
He was tasting so good, they had to come back for more.
Told all of his buddies about it.
Exactly. There is a couple things that I wanted to just talk about overall with the film that I really enjoyed. And again, this is not going to come as a surprise to the both of you, but I am such a sucker for scores in films. Like, easily the number one genre of music that I listen to is original soundtracks from films, TV shows. And I have quite a few of these songs on repeat on one of my playlists that I listen to. And it had a very interesting blend. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the band Wardruna, but they're a old English Viking band that play like they did the soundtrack in the show Vikings. Obviously, this was not that, but you could hear in the background a lot of the Celtic inspiration that they took from it. It made you really feel like you were listening to some form of a Viking sort of story, or just something based in Old English, you might say.
Yeah. It definitely has some of my favorite songs in this.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and I just, again, John Powell's the person who did the score, and he really did just such an amazing job with it. And I'm sad that he did not get an Oscar for this, but I think 2010 was just a crazy year. I mean, like I said, it was the 10th highest grossing film of 2010. I don't have the other films that were released at that time, but it must have been quite a crazy year to be this low on that front. Have either of you read the actual book that it was based off of?
I haven't actually. This was news to me. I actually didn't know that it was based off a book. Or I probably would have read it a while ago, because I'm sure I would love it. But yeah, back on the scores, Bryce, I'm the same. I listen to movie scores a ton. I'll share you my like writing album that I listen to when I write and read, or sometimes even when I'm just like walking around. And you should send me yours as well. But yeah, that specifically the scene from their first flight, when they're trying to figure out how to collaborate, and when the score kicks in, when he flicks the tail snaps into place and they figure it out and the score drops, and it's fantastic.
It really is such a science. And again, there's no dragon in this film, but one movie that I always look to for score and just how it really amplifies the story is Interstellar, specifically like when they're leaving the one planet. I mean, the score just makes it all insane, but it really can just have almost like a magical, somebody once said, and again, I know this is not a music Nana, you could add music podcast to the growing list of names of what type of podcast this is. But somebody was once talking about that music is the closest thing to magic that humans have like mainstream knowledge of, because music really does just have such an ability to change everything around it. Like music can make you feel in a way that, I mean, there's definitely art that can make you feel a way if you look at it for long enough, or reading that can make you, but I feel like music very universally has the ability to change how you're feeling. I mean, there's a reason that when we all went through a breakup, we had our sad boy playlist that we have to go and listen to.
Bryce, I was looking at the movies that released that same year, and I'm pretty sure this is why John Powell didn't win. So number 1 is Inception.
Okay.
2 is Shutter Island. Hold on. 3 is Incendies, which I've never seen. 4 is How to Train Your Dragon, and then it goes down from there. But there's like Black Swan, Remember Me, Tron. So there's the Twilight, Eclipse. So I mean, there's a lot of good soundtracks that year.
I mean, Inception alone, right there. Like Christopher Nolan is just, we got to stay on track. We've got to stay on track. But Christopher Nolan is amazing. But is there anything overall that we want to discuss about just our overall thoughts and feelings about the film before we dive into chapter 1 of this amazing movie?
I did want to make a note of this just because maybe we'll get a sponsorship. Hey, you never know unless you ask. So this is related to the movie, but not directly tied to the movie. If you guys did not know, Epic Universe for Universal Studios just barely opened. And one of the lands that they just barely opened with it is Berk. And if you guys have not seen how cool Berk looks yet, they did an amazing job. Like you go through the portal and there's a stone kind of hiding, the scene. And then as soon as you go past the stone and walk around it, it is just like they drop you into the movie. That opening scene where he's describing Berk. It's just like that. There's, a roller coaster with a dragon that comes right next to you. It has a big lake out in front of it. It has the mountain with the Vikings at the front door. I mean, it looks amazing. And so anyway, I just wanted to make note of that because it goes along with the world building.
Well, is that the video that you sent me with the dragon animatronics?
That's right there with it. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you've seen these, TD, but they have these dragons that are, I mean, they're clearly like these different robots that they put together, but they look pretty great for what they are.
Yeah, it looks awesome. It's been all over my like social media feed. I've seen a ton of it. It looks really cool.
Until the AI take over, I'm going to love them. I'll just say. And before we actually dive in, I'm just going to have to highlight David. What are we doing? You've never seen this movie? You're in this community of dragon lovers and you've never seen How to Train Your Dragon. I'm not going to bash. I'm not going to say anything negative. I'm just going to say David, you've been assigned homework. You have to watch this movie within the next 2 weeks. I want to report on my desk, and Josh will be the one grading it. Anything else that we want to highlight before we dive into chapter 1?
This movie would be a 10 out of 10 for me if they picked a different voice actor for Hiccup, and I'm so sorry if that's a hot take, but
I was going to save that for chapter 1, and I actually
sorry, carry on.
Let's save. No. I'm glad that I'm not the only one, because I thought I was going to come in with a hot take. But let's go ahead and dive into chapter 1, and then we can rip into this guy and hope that he never sees this podcast.
Yeah.
So, chapter 1: The Outcast and the Dragon. The Viking village of Berk is under constant attack by dragons, and Hiccup, the scrawny misfit son of Chief Stoic, is deemed too weak to fight. During a raid, Hiccup uses his invention to shoot down a rare night fury, though no one believes him. Hiccup ventures into the forest and finds the injured dragon, but cannot bring himself to kill it. Instead, he frees it, only for the dragon to pin him down and spare his life. Stoic, determined to end the dragon threat, sets sails with a Viking fleet to find the dragon's nest, leaving Hiccup behind. Hiccup is enrolled in a dragon fighting class where he struggles while his peers, including his crush Astrid, excel. Hiccup, feeling like a failure, returns to the forest and discovers the Night Fury trapped in a cove, unable to fly due to a damaged tail fin. Now, again, I think that I actually really do enjoy Jay Bacello. I think he's great in Tropic Thunder. I think he's in This Is the End, but his voice makes me want to jump off a cliff. Like, I am not.
Tell me how you really feel.
So I don't know if that's the same thing that you're feeling over here, TD, but his voice is just so obnoxious. It just, like, he makes me want to shove him into a locker over here with the voice going on over here.
Yeah, it's to the point that it's like distracting for me, which is funny. Like normally, like dialogue being poorly written is what's distracting. I don't think the dialogue's bad. I think it's excellent for, a movie specifically targeting kids. I think it's great and it's witty, it's clever, it's fun. But his voice is actually distracting for me. And even like progressing into the next 2 movies, which I also think are great. And there's some great moments with Hiccup. And the whole time I'm just thinking, gosh, this would be incredible if it was anybody else's voice.
I know he's way too young, but I actually think Tom Holland as a voice actor would have just killed it. Like, if he was just 5 years older, I think that he would have fit quite well in this role, because he has a very youthful, not a very threatening voice.
Right.
But at the same time, like, I get what they're trying to do with Jay, but it ain't it. Like, it's just too much, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Annoying.
The man is so nasally.
It's too annoying.
Yeah.
I do just want to sort of dive in, and I don't know why it was not so obvious to me when I watched this movie initially, but there's a lot that I feel like there's a lot of people that could have this connection. And not to get into our, again, a sad boy phase here, but something that I really did like about this movie is I think Hiccup is probably one of the most relatable main characters to just what I've experienced in my own personal life. In the sense of, like, he initially has this goal of wanting to be a dragon slayer, and he thinks that that's what's going to make him happy. If he eventually is a dragon slayer, he will be able to do that. And not only be a dragon slayer, but be the best dragon slayer. But he doesn't have the strength to do it. He doesn't have the fortitude to do it. But at the same time, like, people around him sort of expect him because he's the chief's son. And the reason I'm just tying that to is just opening up about myself. My family is a very athletic family. Both of my grandfathers were state champion wrestlers, and one grandpa actually, because he got married and had a kid before he could go to college, wasn't able to wrestle in college, but they hired him immediately to be the coach of the wrestling team at the college that he was initially offered. So, and then my dad was also just offered football scholarships. And for the life of me, I could not keep up with the people that I was playing football with. I was just too scrawny. I did everything to gain weight, and I could not get the mass that I wanted to play football. But eventually it led to me running events, and my career is event management, and I love doing that. And I think that overall, and again, not to be segueing too much, but one of the messages that I really love about this film is, yes, pursue your dreams, yes, pursue what you want, but at the same time, like, you have to lead into your own strengths. And it seemed like Hiccup only wanted to be a dragon slayer because that's what everybody else around him wanted him to be, where he actually was in love. I don't want to say in love with this dragon, but he cared about this dragon. He didn't want to kill the dragon. And he used that method to become a dragon rider, which, let's be real, being a dragon rider, so much cooler than being a dragon slayer. Just saying. But that's my soap opera bit right there based off of the movie, but really a reason that I thoroughly love this movie and why it's going to reflect so in the dragon score at the end of the film.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Josh, being a teacher, you can attest to this. Young adults and kids, we are so desperate to fit in, right? We want to be just like everybody else and just kind of blend in, because it's scary to stand out and it's scary to be different. And so it's a phenomenal message for kids. Just like you said, to as tacky, as juvenile as it sounds, be yourself and you'll discover your best self. And that's when you start to grow and change, is when you lean into your strengths and your gifts and your passions. And it's a lot easier to just blend in and go down the easy route. But yeah, it's, again, for a kids movie, it's a great message, and just they go about it in a really clever way. And you add dragons, and obviously I'm gonna be hooked.
No, I definitely agree. Everyone can kind of attest to this, and that's why this movie is so great, even as a kids movie, and I think it's a C.S. Lewis quote. Just because it's a book written for kids doesn't mean that it can't be a good story if it's for adults too. If adults can relate to it, that's what makes it a good book. And so Hiccup as a character, I think that he's very relatable. He wants to be accepted, and all of us want to be accepted. It's tough, and maybe I'm just speaking from a middle school, high school perspective. But, everyone wants to fit in. We want to conform to everyone else. Hiccup's want is to be accepted. And you'll see later on in the movie, he finally gets what he wants, but it's not what he needs. And I forget what writer, it might have been Brandon Sanderson or somebody else, but, there's that dichotomy of want versus need. And Shrek wants to be left alone and live in his swamp, and he finally gets what he wants, but it's not what he needs, and so I feel like this is what makes really good writing is that part of it.
No, I agree with both of what you're saying there. And it's funny you mentioned even just at high school, but I see it with my job just in general. You see people just wanting to fit in, and they're willing to change so much about themselves to fit in. And I think that something that I really try to pride myself in, and I have the attitude, and I just was able to learn it from people around me specifically. And I know that you know about him, Josh, and I have a friend of mine, TD, named Chase. He's a trainer that I met at the gym initially, and he really just amplified to me that just never be afraid to be who you are, be yourself, and just has taught me that lesson over and over again. And to the point of where I'm the dorky person that I am today. I'm not afraid to wear wacky shirts to work. I'm not afraid to talk about dragon movies for ridiculous amounts of hours, and talk about how Enchanted is a divorced dad film for an ungodly amount of time. But yeah, I just really, because I know there was at one point in my life, I was very concerned about what other people thought of me. I did not care about being happy I thought being happy was just having people accept me and bring them in. Again, I think that, I'm not trying to make this a self-help podcast over here, but I think it was 3 times during the movie that they referred to hey, you eat, well, they said twice, hey, you need to be less like this, referring to Hiccup and indicating all of them. But at the very end, you're like, hey, we're saved and you're amazing because of this. And he referred to all of them. And it's such a simple, easy message that is able to be taught to kids. But at the same time, I feel like there's adults to this day that still need to be learning this lesson. I don't know if that's just a sign that we are in a society of man children, but that could very well be just translating onto that front.
Yeah, well said.
But also, again, I know I dived into it, but I love the fact that we just started off the story with the raid in the village, and they were making a big emphasis talking about how all the buildings are new, but it's an old island and it happened all the time. That was the only raid that took place in the entire movie that we saw. I don't know if there was any other continuity going on, but I'm pretty sure that's the only raid that took place during the entire movie, which, I mean, it is what it is, but it's just funny that they're making such a big, oh, these dragons, they're coming all the time, but literally they are just unless it was Toothless that was leading them to Berk the entire time, which, you know, that we can play with that as we will.
No, that first raid scene, that is an awesome one. I was just trying to find my notes on it. I had to watch it several times because there's so many little things in the world building alone. Just even that first like little thing that he says about Berk as he's describing it. I love how he describes, you know, this is Berk. It's 12 days north of Hopeless and a few degrees south of freezing to death. It's located solidly on the mountain of misery. My village, in a word, sturdy. You know, and he goes on throughout it, but how much like little bits do you get, you know, you get to know about the people, the weather, the food, you know, just from that one little paragraph that he says. I love it.
Well, I don't know about, so a lot of my ancestry came from Denmark and Northern Ireland. So I love doing research into Nordic and Scandinavian just history. And obviously this is a story based off around Vikings, and there's a reason that Vikings are known for being raiders, because they're from climates that are just so harsh. They're not able to grow that much. And so they have to go and just steal from other people. And these places are just miserable places, and they're creating miserable people. I had a friend who's actually from Norway, and they were telling me about how just even to this day, like there's obviously some beautiful places in Norway, and we have modern technology to circumnavigate the elements, but it's still one of those things where I can't, my siblings served an LDS mission in Russia, and they just tell me about how miserable the winters are in Russia. It is, I can't even comprehend how cold it is. Like they have to wear goggles because otherwise their eyes will start to freeze, sort of situations. And just like, no, I like the cold. I don't mind the cold. TD, I know you're in California, and that's not even in the definition of cold in that state.
Correct. I'm quite spoiled. I live in the foil of Berk, where it's honestly it's 70 degrees 99% of the time. We're spoiled over here.
Well, Josh and I are trapped in a desert that is a little bipolar. Sometimes it is 80 degrees. Other times it is negative 12 degrees. It can't seem to make up its mind.
It's been nice lately. It's been awesome.
Well, yeah, but then it also, nobody wants, we did our episode talk about Utah. They don't want to know more about Utah. But another reason I really loved the introduction scene is because it did just such a great job. It didn't feel too top heavy about learning everything, because you did get more details about the personality of just one, the dragons, two, the individuals within the personalities of the characters within the show. And three, it just did it such a great job in a fun way of introducing what each one of the dragons were able to do. Like, they were able to do just sort of like a monologue for each one of the different dragons that we covered. Like we had the Crunkle, we had the Furious, the Monstrous Fury, and just all those different types of dragons that are going on. And then obviously Toothless as the Night Fury.
Yes, I'll say it's a great example of avoiding the exposition dump that we all kind of hate at the beginning of a movie, especially a fantasy movie. Often the exposition dump is just so painful, but this is a really clever way to introduce us to the world, the characters, and the history of that world and the current threat without just having someone literally read off a one-page note of, okay, here's the history, here's some strange topics and words you've never heard of, and you immediately check out. So it's a great, you know, if you're starting to write or interested in storytelling, it's a great example of how to give exposition and lore without putting your audience to sleep.
Well, I do want to just touch on that a little bit, TD. Like, I'd love to pick your brain on how do you circumnavigate when writing? Obviously, these characters have these thoughts and have these opinions or just have this knowledge in general, but we as viewers coming into a story don't have it. And again, I know that this is a very unique situation, very different from writing a book. Movies, books are both ways of storytelling, but you have a lot more. There's a different ways. How do you relay that without just being like, and Bob knows X, Y, Z, and just give the laundry list of things? But at the same time, your characters are literally people. They have past knowledge, and you can't just like pour in that they know algebra, they know the history, and like, how do you, because I've seen several different ways that authors have done it. I've seen where it's the whole, in Aragon, Brom telling it in a story, and that's, everyone's like, oh, there goes Brom telling the story again. But it's something that we as readers have no idea about. Or it's sometimes even like how Sanderson And this is one of the few things that I don't even know if I really want to say it's critical, but it's just so hard because the first 200 pages of reading a Sanderson book is so confusing because you're just going off of the work, like you're being thrown into the story, not the other way around. So again, I know this is sort of a long-winded question, but how do you personally go about this portion of writing?
So I'll say from a perspective of what I like as a reader that I try to implement in my writing is I love when a writer, an author, a storyteller, filmmaker, whatever, doesn't treat me like I'm stupid. That they don't do the expo dump. Okay, here's all the information you need in the first 15 seconds of the movie or first minute, whatever it is, and they just lay it out and say it, just deliver it to you directly that way. I like when they trust that, oh, it's okay that I don't know everything right now, and that I'm going to walk through with the characters and I'm going to learn as you go. I think like Sanderson is an extreme example where I do really very much like how Brandon works, where he says, I trust that they're going to figure it out. I trust they're going to be patient and stick with the story, and they're going to learn with my characters as they go. But I understand that that turns a lot of people off. Like I know a lot of people that didn't finish Wave Kings because they're like, the first 200 pages are brutal. I have no idea what the hell is happening. I'm like, yeah, I totally understand. So I think there's got to be a fine line where you can trust that your audience is going to be a little bit patient, and they're going to offer you that trust of like, okay, I know you're going to give me what I need to know, and I know you're going to do it in a unique way. Often, like what you said on the Brahm thing, it can be kind of seen as a cliche, like, the old shaman around the fire that our character happens to pass by and they hear it through dialogue. I love dropping lore and history just through dialogue and like try to make it seem more like casual conversation and just hope that my reader is going to piece it together. But I think it's something really challenging to avoid the exposition drop, and I certainly haven't mastered it. But circling back, I love when the writer, storyteller, whoever it is, trusts that I'm going to use some critical thinking and piece some things together on my own to kind of better understand the world.
I know it's a completely different, like it's still a form of storytelling. And I know, Josh, you might be saying, no, that is storytelling. But when you are playing Dungeons and Dragons or any role-playing sort of game, and you're just telling people about what's going on in the world, I love to try to drop hints on like what's going to be coming up later in the game. Like, oh, hey, there is a scorpion that has a wizard's tower on the back of it. It's a massive scorpion. It's been sighted in the demon waste. Just keep an eye out. And sure enough, like 200 hours later, the party is going there. The problem I do find with that is you're expecting your players to try to pick up too much information at one point in time when you're just dropping hints like that, unless you're literally just dropping up there. But let's get into chapter 2, secrets and friendship. Hiccup begins secretly visiting the dragon, whom he names Toothless, and builds a harness and a prosthetic fin to help him fly. Through trial and error, Hiccup bonds with Toothless, learning dragon behavior and realizing they are more than just mindless killers. Back in training, Hiccup uses his newfound knowledge to subdue dragons effortlessly, impressing his classmates, but making Astrid suspicious. Stoic's fleet returns in ruins, having failed to find the nest. Hiccup now faces a final exam where he must kill a dragon, something he refuses to do. When he tries to flee with Toothless, Astrid follows and discovers the truth. Hiccup takes her on a flight where they witness the dragon being enslaved by the monstrous Red Death, forcing them to raid Berk for food. Hiccup must decide, reveal the truth and risk Toothless' safety, or stay silent while the village prepares to execute their deadly plan. I don't know if you guys had this, and maybe it's completely unrealistic, but when I was watching this scene, I was also with my dogs, and I'm sure you guys have always had the thought, like, how did we end up from wolves to like a pug or a chihuahua? Like, how did this even happen? And so like I really was thinking through this, and maybe it's just because it was Old English themed or a Viking theme, that this could have been very similar to how man sort of first interacted with wolves to become but again, maybe that's just me being like, trying to relate to something in real life over here that's going on. Just that tie between, because I mean, I didn't mean to mention this before, but I did some research on how they were trying to base the dragons off of, and Toothless is it's a little weird. He's based off of a panther mixed with a fighter jet. That's what they tried to go with. I don't know why, but that's what they were going on that front there.
See, and I didn't get that. I went through it because I was like, I know that Toothless has a lot of characteristics of like a cat, and they give it to all the dragons. So for instance, slitted eyes, fascination with grass like it's catnip, likes to eat fish, stalks like a cat, regurgitates food, afraid of snake-like things. The eel, scratching under the chin is their favorite thing. They like to follow lights like lasers on the floor, but they also have several characteristics of like a bat, which is like Toothless hangs upside down sometimes, and then they use sound to throw off like the aim of dragons in general. So I think it's a really cool take on dragons in this, and it's just different because whenever we talk about dragons, we always think of reptiles, and so combining these, I think that it's really cool, and it gives an extra dimension to dragons in general.
For sure. Any other things you want to add onto that section, TD?
Yeah, I was gonna say something really similar. I just think there's a lot of characteristics that we haven't seen in media that they use with these dragons that just make them stand out and make them really memorable and add a ton of character. Obviously, like you said, all the little quirks that Toothless has that are cat-like are just fun. And I love the trope of a goofy character like that can turn from like this kind of like almost sweet house cat into a stealth bomber or fighter jet, whatever you said. Is really fun when they have that dual personality where it's like they're a cinnamon roll until they're not, and they can kill you.
We talked about the Rankin and Bass Hobbit film, and TD, I don't know when the last time you saw that version of the Hobbit was, but Smog is very cat-like in that depiction. If you look at his face, you can very much see that they used cat looks as an inspiration when designing Smog. And Austin and I had this conversation of like, it does make more sense to have dragons be like cat-like. And one thing that I always actually noticed when reading the Aragon series is Saphira had a lot of cat-like traits, with both in just her attitude and how she hunted, how she played around. So it is fascinating to me that they have dragons be portrayed more like cats than really even just reptiles in general. Like I feel like they are depicted in that way, and I don't know if they're just trying to humanize them more or if they are just trying to get that aspect of it.
Well, I don't know if you've ever owned a lizard or watched a lizard for an extended amount of time. There's just a lot of laying down. The most exciting thing they do is the like push-up thing when they're in the sun. They get a little pump in. But lizards aren't very exciting or interesting creatures, to be honest. So I think it's just a great personality move. It's a great like creative decision to give them. I mean, like cats are far more interesting to watch run around than a lizard lying on a log.
Maybe like I agree. I do definitely agree on that front. But I also think if they were to create more of these dragons as villains, like I don't know, one of my I say favorite, but it's one of those videos that I'm just like, whoa, what on earth is going on? But there's a video of a crocodile being fed at a zoo, and they throw this meat in, and one crocodile just rips the leg off of another crocodile, thinking that it's the meat, and the crocodile is just sitting there like, what the hell, dude? Like, why did you just like did it doesn't react? Why did you just do that? But it didn't seem to like react in pain. It didn't seem to like really flinch. It like they are dinosaurs that are soulless creatures essentially. And again, like I know it doesn't make for as exciting main character, but I wish that they would sort of lean into that with a villain role with a dragon. Again, I know this is not, I mean, there is a dragon villain in this particular one, but there's really no personality to it. But I think it does lend itself when you do have that reptilian soulless just anger and hunger and just base emotions. It makes for something that's interesting and terrifying.
For sure. I haven't seen the third one in a long time. I think I saw it in theaters when it first came out. But I feel like the scorpion dragons that the villain, or the scorpion, dragons that the main villain has are a little more like that, if I remember correct. Like a little more cold and intimidating. They're not like fun, dog-like, cat-like ones. And I think that's super effective too.
For sure. And I'm not saying that they don't do it. It's just, it's interesting that they decide, and it does totally make sense where cats have so much more personality. They have that level of love, and to give them that, and I also do just, I mean, it's also one thing. I am definitely a dog guy more than I am a cat guy. My sister will always shake her head at that to me, but that's just who I am. I prefer my stupid little doggos over intelligent cats any day of the week.
Maybe that's why you like the Gronkle, because when I was watching it, I was like, that's a dumb dog. That is a dog right there.
That's funny.
100%. They base that one entirely off of the dog. Throw a stick, it will go for it 100% of the time.
It gives strong English bulldog vibes. I will say that. Just existing is an effort for them.
We all just want a buddy who's dumber than we are. That's where the dogs come in.
Fun fact about the film that I meant to say at the top of it, but I was just looking over our notes. But this film actually holds a 99% on Rotten Tomato, which is the number one DreamWorks film for highest score. And I definitely do think it agrees, which is hilarious, actually, because 2 weeks ago we covered the Dungeons and Dragons movie that came out in 2000, and it has a 9% on Rotten Tomatoes. So we're going from 9% to 99%. So, and I'll say this, there is a noticeable difference. There is a noticeable difference when you're seeing that on a score. Now, I really did love the training scenes. They were a lot of fun to necessarily see in such a, like, I really would love to learn more about the lore of how they actually got these dragons, built this enclosure, and really just how long they've been dealing with this dragon problem in general. Because I know they say that it's been a long time. It's not a new island, but all the houses are new. So how many generations have they been fighting dragons? How long have they been harassed? But long enough to build an entire dragon-proof cage to deal with them as a problem.
Well, the good news, Bryce, is today's world, I'm sure you're going to get 12 prequels, whether you want them or not. They're coming eventually, I'm sure.
Which I do just want to say in the chat, I really appreciate Nana, David, and Mikkel for commenting in the chat over here. One of you were asking if we're going to be watching the live action. I am going to be watching the live action. I agree with you guys in the chat where I do think it definitely is a money grab. I don't think we're going to get anything new. And if we do get anything new, I think it's going to... I haven't seen the new Lilo and Stitch, but I've been seeing how people hate the new Lilo and Stitch, which is sad because Lilo and Stitch was one of my favorite films as a kid. And I can't imagine that they're going to be making it better. But at the same time, I'm sure it is a cash grab. Like at this point, I'm willing to bet that 85% of movies that are made are just purely cash grabs going on.
Yeah. This movie isn't that old, and they're doing a live action remake of it. It's for money. But I mean, from what I've seen, it looks really good.
Visually, I'm sure it's going to be amazing. It's one of those things where it makes more sense when they're trying to do these live adaptations of Sleeping Beauty, of Snow White, of Cinderella, because they're coming up on the rule where it becomes just public owned material. So they just have to release something to make it so it is no longer that public. But like I said, David said it earlier, this movie is 15 years old, and it certainly makes me feel old when you put it like that, David. So yeah, I'm going to watch it. I'm going to look for the dragon effects. I'm sure I'm going to love the dragon effects, hopefully. But I also agree where I'm almost a little bitter that I have to go and see this because I don't really want to support the whole... Austin and I actually were talking. I asked him if he wanted to go see this film, and he's like, no, I'm not supporting this.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as Austin. I will not be seeing it in theaters, maybe when it comes to streaming, but I don't want to support it. It fills me with rage.
Well, I mean, there's so many stories out there.
There's so many amazing stories out there.
First of all, I also just have to, if you guys have not seen what TD's been doing on TikTok, on Instagram, please go give him a follow. His Instagram stories and TikToks are hilarious, and I send them to but I mean, I just finished the first 3 books of Red Rising, and I just crack up every single time that you're doing. And I mean, I'm in that same boat where you're like, hey, let's put $4.2 billion into a Red Rising series, because if they had Dune level effects for Red Rising, it'd easily be the greatest thing ever put on television, as well as having TDL Orel as Daryl.
I wish.
And Mustang.
Yes, and Mustang as well. Yeah, I'd have to put on 200 pounds of muscle, but I appreciate your vote.
I've seen your boxing videos.
Long ways out, but we're one step closer every day.
I did really find it interesting. I know we were just talking about how they were at cats, but they also, and I mentioned the Crunkle was like a bumblebee, but they do have a lot of, and they even mentioned that the dragons have bumblebee-like attributes where they have to return to the nest to feed the Red Death, which makes me wonder, like, are they all actually offspring of the Red Death, or like is the Red Death just sort of the, I don't know, like I don't know how that necessarily works on that front, but somehow they have, or is there more that I'm just missing here, Josh?
No, so in the first movie, it never like explains this, and it's been years since I've seen the second or third, and I wanted to kind of watch those whenever we talk about them. But it's more of an alpha dynamic. So in this one, that giant dragon, that's the alpha, and so everyone kind of pays homage to him because he's the leader. And so when he like roars, you see Toothless at that point, his eyes change back to slits because he knows like the alpha's calling everyone to come back home. And then I think it's like the third or the second, I can't remember, but like Toothless becomes the alpha, and he's the one that gives everyone kind of the orders from that point. So again, kind of taking another element from another animal, wolves. Again, great world building.
I'm curious, TD, unless it's in chapter 3, you said you had some criticisms of the film in general. I'd love to, we're glazing this movie up a little too much. Let's give some constructive criticism over here. Or was it the Jay's voice?
It's really just Jay's voice. That's my main qualm. Like I said, it's almost like it's close to being a 10 out of 10 for me. I think there's some cheesy moments, but also like I'm not the target audience for this movie. And then like with dragon design, I'm often kind of the opposite of you, Bryce. I'm not a fan of the chunky design, and they're all like a little chunky, a little round. So like I'm not crazy about a lot of the designs, but we rank like Toothless and Red Death at the end, right? So I won't go too deep into their design,
we'll get to that, but we do have one more chapter. Is there anything else in this second chapter that we want to go over, and before we dive into that?
This is in my opinion, this is like the most important scene of the whole movie, is just when Toothless and Hiccup finally connect, and they go on their first flight, and the music is awesome, the score is awesome, the scene is awesome. Like it is, again, I'm kind of glazing it a little bit, but it is one of the best scenes in all of cinema. They've really done a great job, and the storytelling from character to building the world and the setting. I think it tells a lot, and it adds to the story quite a bit. If you were to take that scene out, I think that you would be missing quite a bit and probably have a much lesser version of the story as a whole.
There's several of these just underlining film messages. And again, like with it being a kid's film, they have to make it sort of blunt and obvious. But I also think that they do such an amazing job of relaying that so it is entertaining to adults. But just the whole idea of like, hey, these are not monsters. Like they're obviously monsters in the sense of that they come at night, they're destroying, they're taking their food. The Vikings don't know how they're going to survive during the winter, but at the same time, humanizing them, like, hey, we have to just give them a chance. Like we have to see where they're coming from. And I don't think they do like a better job than in this scene. And again, I'll just finish this portion up before diving into that chapter. But when Hiccup and Stoic are having that fight, and Stoic is like, they've killed hundreds of our own. And Hiccup responds like, well, we've killed thousands of them. And it's one of those things. It's like, okay, like if it's just hurt people, like sort of true. Like if you want to just keep having problems pop up, just keep doing the business of usual, not willing to try to learn anything about it. And before I dive in, let's go into chapter 3, unless there's anything else we want to add on to there.
One last thing, even like the scene with where Astrid is flying on Hiccup or flying on Toothless for the first time, like that, one of the themes that I
What movie were you watching, Josh? I want to see.
on a different website, isn't it called Toothless the Dragon? Maybe no.
Speaking of sponsorships, Bad Dragon.
Yes. So one of the themes that I saw in this movie was the different points of view. And so it like they just don't understand each other. So like, for instance, Stoic and Hiccup, they have this different point of view. They're trying to both please each other in a way, but like they just don't see eye to eye. And then finally Hiccup starts to see eye to eye with Toothless and see from his point of view and his what he understands. And then Astrid kind of has to be thrown in a little bit harder because she's, like, in fact, one of the best lines of this whole movie is when Astrid yells at him, like, are you taking this seriously? Our parents' fight is about to become our fight. We're about to be thrown into their world, whether you like it or not, and whether you're ready. So she's she's kind of already drank the Kool-Aid. But then when she's flying on Toothless, there's this one part that in there where below the clouds it's night, and then above the clouds it's sunset, and it's beautiful, like the contrast between it. But it's just pointing out like different points of view and how the setting contributes to that. Again, sorry, it's a great moment in the movie.
Hey, no need to apologize. And there's actually some more points I want to dive into, but I think it'd be a lot better in this chapter 3 portion. Chapter 3, the battle for peace. During his final exam, Hiccup attempts to prove dragons can be peaceful, but Stoic's interference provokes the monstrous nightmare into attacking. Toothless swoops in to save Hiccup, but is captured. Stoic disavows Hiccup upon learning his friendship with the dragon. Hiccup accidentally reveals Toothless knows the nest's location, and Stoic takes the dragon as a guide. Inspired by Astrid, Hiccup rallies his friends, teaches them to ride dragons, and they pursue Stoic's fleet. The Vikings awaken the Red Death, which attacks them. Hiccup and his friends arrive just in time to help. Toothless and Hiccup work together to destroy the Red Death, though Hiccup loses his foot in the battle. The Vikings witness Toothless protecting Hiccup, realizing the dragon is not their enemy. Hiccup awakens in the New Berk, where dragons and Vikings live in harmony. He earns the village respects, reconciles with Stoic, and shares a kiss with Astrid. The prosthetic foot and Toothless by his side, Hiccup embraces his role as the bridge between humans and dragons. I love actually seeing parental relationships within books. TD, like just talking about your book, not going into too much detail, but it's just fascinating to see the relationship between the main character and their father. It's obviously not your stereotypical relationship where it is the father is just an abusive, angry drunkard and sort of just abusing his family around him. And not to say that this is the same situation, but at the same time, like Stoic is not a good dad in this film. And a lot of people relay that he is an underlying villain, which I don't think I necessarily agree with. I think it's completely inappropriate that he disavows Hiccup at the end of this film here. But I also think that it's coming, and just sort of piggybacking off what you were saying there, Josh, they're preparing them for this fight. And in Stoic's eyes, Hiccup is taking the side of the dragon. So he views his son as a traitor. And we're going to find out in later films down the line that Hiccup's mother was missing during this conflict. And who knows how many of Stoic's friends have been killed by dragons and have suffered from this. So again, to call Stoic a villain, I'm not going to argue with anyone who would necessarily say that he is, but at the same time, I think it's a little harsh to be calling it. It's just an interesting to see the different dynamic that people have with like parental figures in fantasy. I feel like it's the most common trope to make a fantasy hero an orphan. So I'm always just curious to see the different relationships that they have with their parents, because it does oftentimes set them down a different path. And it's very interesting to see that.
Yeah, I think that it's part of what makes this film so great is the writing is making we totally understand and we see Stoic's perspective. And we also totally understand and we see Hiccup's perspective. Of course, we lean more towards Hiccup because we are seeing from his perspective how the dragons truly are. But at the same time, we're like, Stoic just simply wants to defend his people at the end of it. He actually wants to defend Hiccup, even if he doesn't always show it through his words and actions. But his end goal is to defend his family and his people. So that's what's great writing is we feel that turmoil. We see both sides, and we're of course rooting for Hiccup. And I think the full circle of there's so many little components that this ending feels really satisfying in the third act. All the things come together, all the little pieces line up, and like stuff like Hiccup he sketches and he's a tinkerer, he's engineering, and all of those things come into play at the end as he makes saddles and harnesses and all the little gadgets and gizmos that help Hiccup fly. And of course it's beautiful because those are things that the Vikings, that's why they didn't respect Hiccup originally, is because like he's more into the arts and being creative, and they're like, yeah man, just go bonk the dragon on the head with a hammer, that's what we do. And so to see them so fully like appreciate him in the end and his talents really get to shine, like I said, it's great writing, and the full circle it feels really cohesive at the end.
For sure. I did love And again, it's such a stupid throwaway line, but when Hiccup is going to his final test and he picks up his shield and he picks up the knife and the dad is like, I would have gone for the hammer. I'm like, it's like his dad definitely gives off the vibe. Like, I know they were trying to make him the sports dad. Like, he wants his son to be just like him. He's like that legendary athlete and wants his son to be a legendary, but there is a step further of it where this is a life or death situation, because I think it is even back in chapter 1, like, he's scared for Hiccup. He doesn't want him to go out there, not because, like, sure, there's the whole like he's getting in the way, but it's out of a level of just, I want him to be safe. Because in all reality, if he just didn't care about his son and just didn't want to, like, yeah, go out there, get chomped by a dragon and solve a lot of my problems there. But no, he's like, no, stay inside, stay safe. You're not equipped to fight these dragons. So I really didn't. And I am also just a sucker for Gerard Butler. So, I mean, I'm just going to always, he is awesome.
Well, I'll kind of point this out. This goes back to like the first bit, but like the introduction where we learn so much about the characters. As again, this is a mastery class of showing, not telling, is like how everyone views Hiccup throughout while the raid is going on. You know, the villagers are saying like, who let him out? Or like, Hiccup, get out of the way, you know. And even there's like a guy, if you guys know, I had to watch the introduction like twice, so I picked up on these little things. There's like a guy picking his ear, you know, standing just there by alone. No one says anything about him, but lo and behold, Hiccup, you know, they would rather him like be out of the way. Even to the point that he goes up to his dad and his dad asks, what is he doing out again? As if it's like some like dog that's escaped from the backyard, you know. But it's a master class in how to build that world building of how everyone views Hiccup and views the world around them, you know. So just kind of going to Stoic, you know.
I definitely agree on that front. And I don't know if you guys picked up on this in this particular point, but when the catapults were launching the rocks, like, again, I know it's a difference between rocks and stakes, but Stoic is able to throw those stakes like a javelin further than the catapults were able to throw the rocks, because he's like throwing those stakes and it's like hitting him in the eyes. And when the rocks are getting launched, it's like hitting the Red Death around the chest, like not doing anything at all. I'm just like, okay, like I love me my big thick boys over here. I love showing me my strong Vikings, but come on, how is he stronger than a catapult over here?
Big thick dragons.
Big thick dragons and big thick Vikings. What can I say? I have a type.
Man, that's a type for sure.
I really did enjoy how this all sort of came about. The friends were a little bit nobody characters until this last little bit of the film. I mean, yeah, they were there during the training portions, but it wasn't until like this actual coming to fight the Red Death did I actually think that they really lend themselves to be anything or anybody. I also did not realize until this second walkthrough that Jonah Hill was one of those classmates, which I love just Jonah Hill as an actor. Like, he's one of my, like, I know he has had a questionable things go on and outright not good things, but at the same time, I separated the art from the artist over here. But I did not realize that he was in this film.
I didn't either until I was like listening. I was like, who the heck is that? He plays a character named Snotlout, you know, and I thought that it was some throwaway character. And then I looked at it, I was like, oh my gosh, that's Jonah Hill.
He's the overconfident. Okay.
There you go.
Well, the overconfident one was fun, but my favorite was the one who was just listing like, oh, jaw strength 27, fire breath 6. Like, I was thinking in my head, like, yeah, that'd probably be me if I was in this society, just over here with all the stats of the dragons.
Old Red Dragon, Bryce, how much HP does he have?
Not enough. Is there anything else that we want to necessarily cover of this dragon before we go into the dragon raid, or just overall thoughts about the film? I know we went over it in the beginning, but I just love to give you each a chance to talk about what just final thoughts on the film.
I do want to point this out, just like good writing in general. I know that you, Bryce, did a review of, I can't remember the name. It was that princess movie where she like...
Damsel.
There we go. So, and I haven't seen it, but I saw your review. That was good enough for me. But just like the good writing compared to bad writing, okay, how she outsmarts the dragon, right? And that's how she beats it, compared to how these guys outsmart the dragon. You know, it leaps and bounds better writing, because, you know, there's this giant massive dragon that's could crush any single person easy. And then there's just Toothless and a Hiccup, they're not going to be able to outpower this creature. So what do? They go up really high, and then as they're coming back down, he shoots holes through all the wings, so that the dragon can't stop itself, and they use its own force against it. Like, that's such good writing, so much better writing than what Damsel did. Again, just I love the writing of this movie. It's so good.
Yeah, I'll jump on that. All of that spectacle is great, and that's a huge highlight. But because the writing is so great and we genuinely care about Hiccup and Toothless, the emotional impact is there. As we've seen with like how many hundreds of thousands of big blockbuster movies with epic, final battles, we've seen that we genuinely don't care because the writing's not there. And so it's so impressive to, an animated film for children that I really care that Stoic and Hiccup make up in the end. I really care that Aster starts to admire the dorky kid in her class just because the writing is so solid. And I'll touch one more time. The score is just fantastic. And I'm so impressed with the score every time.
Both of those things I thoroughly agree with. And especially I'm going to say this once again, and I'm going to say it 1,000 times more. I'm going to cover films that are you just do not get invested. There are dragon movies where you just have characters that you could not care about any less. One film that Austin and I covered was The Last Dragon. I think it's called The Last Dragon. No, it's a film. It wasn't that good. It wasn't that great. If they made Raya look like a good movie, TD, I'll just say that.
Yikes. Yeah.
And it's one of those things. There was an epic battle at the end where there was a necromancer becoming a dragon, essentially. And I was just like, I just don't care because you don't get invested with the main character. And they humanize Hiccup, and they even humanize Toothless in a way that you're like, you want to know what's going to happen. You feel for him. And I think that that's something that they're really losing touch with a lot in movies nowadays, is they're making these characters not really relatable, and you're not really in a sense able to root for them because they are either just so much of a heroic figure that they're just out of the mind of not being relatable, or B, that they're just so boring that you just don't even see yourself being like, they're so boring you don't want to relate with them.
All these characters are so relatable because you see what they want and what their aspirations are, And I think a lot of movies nowadays have that badass, woman figure in them. Astrid is that character, but it's better writing. Arcane, and again, Bryce, I hope that you someday do Arcane. I know it has no dragons whatsoever, but like, even looking at Arcane, badass women are all over in that. It's good writing. There is a difference between bad writing and good writing. And this is one of those perfect explanations. Even Stoic has like a redemption arc. These side characters have arcs within them. It's awesome. This is great writing overall.
No, I agree. And I definitely think that, and I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh yeah, there is no misogyny within society nowadays, and that people like, there obviously is. But I also think that whenever films are not doing well, a lot of people that are tied to them are like, oh, it's because of misogyny that it didn't do well. I'm like, well, I'm sure there's that, but again, I'll point to Attack on Titan. Like, Attack on Titan has some very powerful female leads in it. Arguably one of the greatest stories ever told. Like, but again, not to dive into a whole subject there, but any other last thoughts before we go ahead and give these two dragons a grade?
Yes, Arcane is top 5 animated series of all time, and I'm disappointed in you for not watching yet.
No, I've seen it. I've watched it several times. I just haven't covered it on the podcast.
Oh, my bad. I thought
it doesn't have a dragon.
Yeah, gotcha. I thought Josh was saying you've never indulged. I was like,
TD, if I had not seen it, you had every right to just drop the podcast, block me on every social media.
I was this close. I was that close.
I am so excited. Like, okay, I'll have to say this. I am so excited with what they're doing when they drop that teaser trailer that I don't even know if it was really a teaser of what they're going to be doing in is it Nocturne? The next Arcane series essentially they're doing, where it's, I don't know, I am just so pumped because I love everything involved. Like, yeah, I can talk about that for hours, but we don't have hours, but we do have dragon grades to get to. Each week, we do a dragon grade, rating a dragon in 5 different categories: design, special effects, characters, film, and X Factor. We scale these creatures on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being abysmal, 10 being incredible, with 5 being okay. Now, TD, I want to start you off with the design for the Red Death, being the main antagonist of this film. So, on a scale of 0 to 10, what do you give it for design?
Don't be furious with me. It's a 5 for me.
Okay, let's hear
I
it.
think overall, like, the size and the just overall look is menacing, which I think is great. But again, I'm not into the big chunky guys.
Fair.
And it's like, it's a cool moment, but it was also like a little genuinely shocking that it could fly because it's just so chunky.
So before we dive in and get Josh's answer on that, I just want to just pick your brain. Like, what would you point to for design-wise in film as one of your favorite dragons design? Just so I can get a sort of tell on what your ideal dragon type is.
Smaug in the Hobbit movies, I think, is just kind of like iconic, perfect, great dragon look. Pretty much anything they're doing in House of the Dragon, all the different dragons in that. I know they're all like pretty, they're not like super diverse in how they look. There's a couple like unique twists in there, but overall, like House of the Dragon, that's when I think of dragons, that's kind of how I like to think of my dragons.
For sure. But I take it that you're more of a Caraxi than a Vagar fan over here then.
Correct. But also Vagar, massive as she is, still like has kind of like that leaner look. She looks like she could fly. Is where I'm going.
Well, she looks like she has arthritis while she's flying, but
it's
still
true,
can fly. Oh, sorry about that tangent. Josh, on a scale of 0 to 10, what do you give the Red Death in design?
I'm sitting at about the same level as TD. I 5. I wasn't too enthralled with it.
Well, I was a little more generous than you guys, but for me, honestly, I'm not a fan. Like, I love horns on a dragon. I love different things. I was just like, what is on this dragon's head? Like, it was a little weird, the little headdress that it had there. It was throwing me off a little bit. I did love the coloring. I think the coloring was a very fitting color for a dragon, especially for a dragon that just is in limbo hibernation mode underneath a mountain, sort of this darker blue and gray. But I gave it a 7. Like, I know for me that I think it's very good, but I also was not a big fan. It was a chonky boy. I also really enjoyed that it had the 6 eyes. I think that was a very interesting direction that they took with it. Even though it had 6 eyes, it was sitting there saying like, oh, its eyes are teeny, so it doesn't have a great sense of sight. I'm like, then why does it have 6 eyes if it doesn't have a great sense of sight? But who am I to question these sort of things? But moving on to the next section. TD, what do you give it on special effects from 0 to 10?
I guess a 10. I think it visually everything looks great. Animation style is awesome. I think too, sometimes it almost, when in animation, when you have a character that's a lot larger than other characters, and this is more common in low budget stuff, but the animation style you can notice like is a little bit different than like smaller characters sometimes. I can't think of any examples off my head, but so I think to have something to that scale and it just like look as great as everything else, I think it's great. So a 10.
I think that's acceptable. Josh?
I didn't hate it, but I'm not an animator. I don't know much about this. It looked fantastic, so I'm gonna give it like a 10 as well.
There we go. We're all Skluvakas Ven here. I gave it a 10 as well, especially when we're thinking this is 2010. This came out 15 years ago, and it looks better than a lot of animation that's coming out nowadays. And again, I don't want this to be a podcast where I'm just bashing on what we've got coming out now, but I really think that a lot of film peaked in the early 2000s, like from that 2005, 2015, I think was some of like the best movies that we've gotten, like visually. The Pirates of the Caribbean were coming out during that, which phenomenal films. I love the animation in that. Like I discussed this a couple weeks ago. Pirates of the Caribbean, The Black Pearl came out in 2003. And if you go back and watch that, like it looks incredible. And again, like the animation is just so good for being 2010 and looking a lot better than what they're doing. They clearly took a lot of effort. It clearly took a lot of time. And Yeah, I think it's a 10. This one, I don't think it's going to get the 10. But TD, what do you give the Red Death for character?
About a 2. As far as villains go, you want to understand their goal. You also kind of want to like relate to them a little bit. And I think like a fun villain is when you're like, I kind of get what they're saying a little bit. Like I know why they're doing this. So of course, like he's just kind of, I don't want to say he's mindless, but he's more of a force of nature to me than he is like a antagonist.
Yes, I agree with that. Josh?
I'm giving it a 3, but more just because of world building. It has the built-in like alpha in there. But other than that, like it doesn't really have much of a story or anything to go with. We don't, like TD said, you don't really know its aspirations or its goals. It's just kind of there. It's a force of nature.
I definitely am lining up with you guys on that. It's interesting. I really understand why people are coming out and trying to say that Stoic was more of an antagonist because, again, he is sort of a negative figure that we're seeing throughout the film, and we're actually getting that side. And again, not to make this a whole tangent, but one of our shared favorite shows is Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. And the one criticism that I'd have is Father is just not as like, he's an awesome villain when you get the full lore, but he's not really that present. Envy's a lot more present throughout the show. Scar is a lot more present throughout the show. Father, he's almost like a background character until he's not. Like that's, and it's even more so with the Red Death. The Red Death is literally just a background character. He's clearly menacing. He's clearly a very powerful creature where he's able to command hundreds of dragons and able to just bend them to his will. But other than the scenes that we saw, we don't get that much. So I think I'm giving it the 2. I'm aligning with TD on this. It's very bad character wise. But we're coming in on one, and the pipe comes out. Josh, how do they allow you to have a pipe at the school?
Hey, you know what? They don't know. It's 3D printed. It can't do jack squat. This is my hater's pipe. You got the shade blockers. I got the hate pipe.
I need a fun prop.
I'm all about props if you guys haven't noticed.
Phil, this should be noted, okay? So the first time you invited me on, I gave you, I thought that I was being kind because I was like giving you a dragon. I want everyone take notice of how rinky-dinky that dollar store dragon is, and then look at the dragons. I had never really taken a moment to like see the dragons that he has on his desk. Those dragons have to be hundreds of dollars. Am I right?
They are about 100 a piece, but
and I gave you a dollar store dragon. Like, hey, thanks for inviting me.
Hey, it's not my fault that Wizards of the Coast decide to nickel and dime their players for everything that they own.
My brother 3D printed this one. I told you I was going to give it to you. I haven't had the moment to give it to you yet, but
hey, that's pretty badass.
We'll get you a 3D printer and you can print them yourself.
Oh, I've got 3. Yeah. Anyways, a grade. ED, what do you give the film score for How to Train Your Dragons 2010 on a scale of 0 to 10?
We're skipping Toothless. We're just jumping to the film score.
The film score is technically part of the dragon grade, so I'll just add that to Toothless's score as well.
I gotcha.
Tell you what, how about we save that? Well, let's save it for once we get to Toothless. But what do you give the X factor? And just a reminder for everybody in the audience, the X factor is just what makes this dragon unique compared to other dragons that you might see in media. Or it can just be giving points that you want to award to it, or it can be taking away points. But TD, what do you give the Red Death on X factor?
I'm going to give it a 3, but here are some positive notes that make it not a 0. I think it's really recognizable. Just like you see it and you're like, okay, I know what franchise this is from, which I think is important. That's great. And 2, I think when it breathes fire, it's really impactful, and it's like you feel the dread every time that he started to open his mouth. You're like, okay, here comes a big fire blast. So I gave him a couple points for those 2 things, but once again, he's an underwhelming design for me.
Fair. Josh, what do you give the X factor for Red Death?
I think that it's cool that it's so big, which is a couple points in its direction, but I don't think there's anything different or that makes it special in any way. I'd say this is like a 4 for me.
4. Okay. Well, once again, I guess I'm being the generous person that I am over here. No, but for me, like and maybe a lot of these things are not necessarily too much tied to the dragon itself, but during the fight, there was a lot of, you touched a little bit on it, Josh, but I really appreciate that they took lessons that were learned throughout the movie and applied it to this dragon fight. Like you said, when they were fighting it, they decided to soar up and then come down, attacking the wings. And then Toothless had his little purple fire go into the dragon because they learned earlier on in the film that dragons are not immune to fire on the inside. They're only immune to fire on the outside. I also think that, I know I joked about it, but we don't really see a lot of dragons are not known for having a lot of eyes. So having 6 eyes is pretty unique. I don't think we're ever going to see a dragon that has 6 eyes again, unless there is one later down the film line here. And I mean, just size wise, I mean, we don't really see that many kaiju level of dragons. I love seeing kaiju level dragons. So again, I know I'm a little more generous on this. I'm giving it the 6. I think it's good on X Factor, but you know, to each their own. I'm not going to be judging on that accordingly too much. Just kidding on there. Which we do not have a final score because I want to save the film score for after grading Toothless. But just starting off on the other side, Josh, I want to give you a chance. What do you give Toothless the design on a scale of 0 to 10?
10. 10. I do I need to go into this? Like the world building, the way that they talk about the dragons, the way that they made them different at 10.
He's a 9 for me, which is very generous on my scale, as you know. Yeah, so many great things. Having him all black, his name being Night Fury is really cool. His unique little fire blast that he does, the sound design on the fire blast, the sound when he flies by that you like recognize if he's not even in the shot and you just hear the fighter jet thing is epic. Retractable teeth are cool. His little tail fin is awesome. And he's obviously become like one of the most recognizable dragons in all media, which says a ton about his design. He's not a 10 for me because he's just a little too rounded. You know, I don't like all the rounding. But besides that, he's a 9 out of 10, which I think is an epic score for a character design.
I do like Toothless as a design. I think I'm leaning more towards you, TD. I think I might be a little bit more critical on it though. Like, yes, he is intimidating, but even when he's trying to be intimidating, I think he's just a little too cute and cuddly. He has like that. The best way I describe it is like how people view bears. Like if you see a bear on like a little video, they're like, oh my gosh, that's such a cute little thing, not realizing that it's one of the most dangerous animals on land over here. Like I think that Toothless very much gives, and some people might give them points, but for me, like I like my scary monsters. I like my vicious dragons, and only like again, I understand why they're trying to humanize him. They're trying to make him just as a main character. But even when you don't know if he's going to be dangerous or not, like when he's tied up in the very beginning, I feel like he's a little too cute, you might say. So I'm giving him the 8. I think that he's great, but I think they could have done a lot better in making him more intimidating. And I think if they would have just if they should have just sharpened out his features and make him a little bit more, even if and again, I know that we're going to see some later down the line, but some of the Night Furies like have headdresses. They have like more horns than just floppy ears. I think that just giving him something, accessorizing him to make him look more intimidating could have made a world of difference. But I don't imagine that this is going to be any different from the score that we did with Red Death. But Josh, what do you give the special effects for Toothless?
10. They did a fantastic job.
No surprise there. No notes. TD.
Yep, just as I said in the last one, 10. And like I said, the sound design, how he flies, the way he moves on both the land and in the air, and his fire blast. It all looks great. 10.
Again, Skluvaka, Sven, we're all in alignment there. I also just want to, like, quick note, I do appreciate that we got to see when Hiccup was coming to the cove initially. You could see, like, the scales that shed it off. I think that was a nice little special effects that they could do. Like, I love reptiles. I know that reptiles shed their scales quite often. And so just giving them that little homage of like, oh, he actually is a reptile, and just giving them that reptilian sort of incumbency right there. But this one, I'm sure, is going to be quite different from Red Death. Josh, what are you giving Toothless on character?
I don't know if you can have a dragon with a better background than this. Just of all the movies that I've seen, I don't know if there is one out there. I don't think that it's perfect. I am sure that there's, you guys could probably find one. And I'm giving it an 8.
Okay.
I think it's very strong. I think that they did a great job at writing the character in general, and I love how much emotion that Toothless can show in just his eyes alone. But I think that it could have been a little bit better.
For sure. TD?
I'm giving him a 9, which seems crazy, but I think he's earned it. And I also think too, I'm kind of, as I'm ranking him, I'm kind of looking at him from like a perspective of all 3 films, and just it's pretty impressive for like a non-speaking character to be able to like track their character arc. And like you said, he's so expressive, you know what he's thinking, and he has a legit relationship with a human character that we like really understand, which I think is so hard to do with a non-speaking character. So I'm giving him a 9.
No, so a conversation that Austin and I would have quite often was we definitely prefer talking dragons. I think it's hard to get a character and a feel for what a dragon is like if it doesn't have a talking dragon. But I think Toothless does the best job. Like, this might be crazy to you guys, but I'm willing to give it the 10. I think Toothless is the pinnacle of being able to express what a dragon is like, what a dragon wants, without actually verbally being able to communicate. And I know it may not make too much sense. Like, yes, they could have done a better job. They could have made Toothless talk, but if we're going to just strictly make Toothless a non-speaking dragon, I think this is exactly how you do it with portraying what a person, like a dragon's character, is like without having that ability to speak. So again, I know I have little caveats under there for giving me the 10, but I think that it should be the standard of like, if a non-verbal character is going to be in a movie, they should be basing it off of Toothless, just with his mannerisms, with how he's able to communicate with his eyes, just even with how he's able to communicate with his facial expressions, just in general. Like when he smiled, like, call me a sucker. I loved it when he kept doing his like weird, creepy little smile where he doesn't have any of his teeth. Like I loved that. I was a sucker for it. But Josh, X Factor. What do you give the X Factor for Toothless?
I think that it's different from a lot of different dragons. In my opinion, he kind of looks like an axolotl, and you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Have you ever seen like an axolotl? He has like the kind of thin but wide shaped head. He has kind of like the weird ears, and the fire is not just your typical fire. I think that this is a solid 9 for me.
Okay. Okay.
Like this is it's different enough that I don't think that you're gonna find another dragon in the same realm.
I could definitely agree with that. TD.
Same. I think he's a 9. Like I said, he's super recognizable. He's become one of the most like iconic dragons in media, and rightfully so, because he's got a bunch of unique little quirks that make him really memorable.
They are selling plushies. They are definitely selling.
They sure are.
It's funny that you mentioned that, Josh, about the fire. I think that it's very interesting that they decided to go with that purple fire. Like, I don't think I've ever seen a dragon with purple fire. I don't think I'm ever going to see another dragon with purple fire. And I'm always just such a sucker for different breath weapons for dragons. So just having all the different expressions of different ways to showing how dragons are able to attack, I really appreciate that they do this within the film. I also agree with you that it does have that axolotl, and it's funny that you mentioned that. I'm trying to do in my own D&D campaigns, I'm trying to come up with sub races for lizardmen, and axolotl lizardmen are some of those are the more wizard spellcasters. Like, they're not necessarily
That's
on the
awesome.
front line.
I love that. That's really cool.
Yeah, I love just coming up with these different, because I mean, surprise, I love the lizardoids fantasy realm, and I think that just going with the basic, like, this is a regular lizard person, is boring. I think you can do different things, like you can make crocodile like lizard men that are more of the beefy barbarians. You can make axolotls the spellcasters, but that's getting too personal over here. But so yeah, I think we're all in alignment on this one. I gave it a 9 on X Factor. So I'm having a feeling that Toothless is going to be one of the highest rated dragons on the show. But before we come out with the final scores, both for Toothless and the Red Death, we have to do with the last category, which is the film score. So TD, what do you give How to Train Your Dragon from 0 to 10?
I give it a 9. I think overall, as we've said, kind of hammered this down, but writing, actors, world building, and the score are all fantastic. The only reason it's not a 10 is voice acting, and the friend characters are like, don't do it for me.
I definitely agree on that front. Josh.
I definitely see where everyone comes from. Like Hiccup has one of the most annoying voices I've ever heard of. But just as the movie in general, I give it a 10. I think this is great. Hiccup follows the hero's journey, which I always think that is a plus in any story. But just in general, like this is one of those like top tier movies that you could teach a master class in just about every form of story writing.
Well, you know how this podcast feels about the hero's journey here, Josh. We get in a lot of fights on the internet over the hero's journey. I forgot how great this film is. Like when I was rewatching, I was like, wow, if I could see this being one of my favorite movies as a kid if I would have watched it a little earlier. Like I could see that, but I think I'm just aligning a little bit with TD on this one. Hiccup's voice made me just want to just grind my ears with an ice pick. And his friends were just like, I mean, they were obnoxious. Like the twins were just obnoxious. They were not funny, in my opinion. They weren't like, I see what they were trying to do, but they were just obnoxious. And I also am not a TJ Miller fan. Like I know that he's funny. I know that he did an all right job in the first Deadpool, but he just doesn't do it for me. And I think they just wasted Jonah Hill's talent in that one. Again, I mentioned the friend that was the Dragon Stat guy. It would have made more sense if that was Hiccup, just based off of what Hiccup was actually doing. But I guess they each had to have a quirk, but they really just were nothing characters. I'm giving it, I'm breaking my own rule again. I'm giving it an 8.5. I'm not willing to go up with a 9 because just one, the voice was just so annoying, and two, the friends were not there. But everything else was just so amazing about it, which comes to, I'll start off with the Red Death. The Red Death comes with a final score of 6.3, which translates to good, not quite very good, but good. However, Toothless comes to a 9.23, which translates to superb, which I think is very appropriate. That also concludes our coverage of How to Train Your Dragon 1. I just want to first take a moment to thank both of you, TD and Josh, for coming on. Before we leave today, TD, I'd love for you just to plug your guys' both of you to plug whatever you want to plug, but TD, I'd love you to give the floor for you to plug whatever you want to plug right now.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. I'm the author of The Titan's Nest Saga. Book 1 is currently available on Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com. Book 2 is coming out this summer. So is a stop-motion short film about the series, which hopefully Bryce will do a episode on one day because there are dragons aplenty. And you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, all the things at TDOREL_.
A fun fact before we go into Josh, I think the first message that I sent to you on Instagram was saying that I wanted to do a dragon grade on your stop fish when it comes out.
That's right. Yeah. Can't wait.
If I'm going to get a strongly worded email, I might cry. I'll just say that. I'm just kidding. Oh, I don't think that's the case. Josh, anything that you want to plug?
Nope. I don't have anything coming up. I'm not on social media. I'm just here. I'm just happy to be here. Thank you, Bryce.
Well, I'll plug. Josh is going to be back next week when we cover How to Train Your Dragon 2. So again, thank you, TD, for coming on. We really appreciate you coming and doing this. Until next, everyone, please go follow TD and go pick up Titan's Nest. I'm currently reading it right now. If you love Dragon Rider series, if you loved the Aragon, if you love just dragons in general, you're going to love Titan's Nest. But until then, please like, share, subscribe, follow, comment. Tell us how much you love this movie. Tell us how much you hate this movie. We'll tell you you're wrong. But until then, have a good night.
That's all for this week's Dragon Lore. Takes cold and hot, spread shore to shore. Enjoyed yourself? Please join the squad. Follow on social media at BigLizPod. And one quick reminder before you go, to rate, review, and share the show. Thank you for listening. It means a lot. See you next week, same time, same spot.